I'll still keep it, if you want to watch it like that, like a class where it builds on itself, I'll still keep those playlists up there for you to, watch in order. But, I understand that a lot of people just want to learn, and that makes a lot of sense, they want to learn one section of something and don't want to have to sift through a bunch of information to find the answer that they're looking for. So now what I'm doing is I'm separating each thing into its own category. And today, all the things that we're going to talk about is basically just the definition. That's really all we're going to get into. The definition of different types of shifting. In general, there is what we call mental shift, there is physical shift, there's dream shift or astral shift, and then there is phantom shift. So modern day paganism doesn't believe in the physical shift, but they believe in everything else. Sorry, it's some kind of fly, gnat, I don't know. However, what I teach, which is ancient paganism, it's the knowledge and the wisdom, literally, of our ancestors. What our ancestors used to believe in before a lot of this was lost and forgotten. Over time, with all that happened and how quickly our ancestors unfortunately died out, a lot of that died out with them, especially in the witch hunt era. A lot of it died out with them, wasn't able to be passed down necessarily. It ended up being like a game of telephone where there's all these gaps of information and people are trying to just fill in the gaps or just don't even fill them in at all. And a lot of times it ends up being starkly different from the original message. Of course, if you've ever played that game as a child, you know what I mean. So modern paganism is kind of that, the missing links that they're trying to fill in the gaps with. And the ancient paganism is that, original message before it was ever broken up and shattered. So for tens of thousands of years, we've always believed that it was technically possible, but that a lot of things had to come into play to even make it possible at all. And when we talk about the physical shifting video, I'll have a video just on that and explain that, because it's so extensive that it needs to explain that in full. It would need its own video. So basically, though, there's just a lot that would have to happen in order for it to actually be possible, but we do say that there is a possibility. So yes, I will include that in this, just in a brief description of it. Anyway, so we're going to start out with the mental shift. That is really the simplest. It doesn't take any magic at all. It's just really the only maybe magic that's in it is that you literally have to shift. Think about this: you have to shift from your human brain to your animal brain. It's like a light switch, and you have to learn how to control it, obviously, so that at will you can come back to human. But there's no other than the going into a very altered state of mind, kind of like when you do any kind of dream work, astral projection, you have to go in that altered state. Well, you are literally going into an altered state. You forget that you have thumbs, you don't really remember how to speak as a human, everything that you do is animalistic, you're walking on all fours, you're, the mannerisms of an animal, the way an animal communicates with body language and vocalizations, and you've got the instincts of an animal. Your logic is the logic of an animal, not the logic of a human. Logic of a human, I'll give you a good example, would say, oh, I like these nice things, I don't want to ruin them. And as soon as you shift into, mine is wolf, so as soon as I shift into my wolf brain, one of the very first things that my wolf brain wants to do is tear up fabric. And so I have to make sure that there's something there that I can tear up that I'm not going to miss. That's not expensive. That's just, that is botched anyway. So that's an example of what I mean. The way you think is very different. And it's all in your mind. So there's you don't get any true mental shift. You don't get any kind of, visionary anything. It's nothing. It's just you mentally, the animal side of you kind of taking over for a while. And you can get stuck there, because especially if, you've suppressed it for so long, once that animal side takes over, it's going to be like, oh, I like this, I want to stay. So there's some tricks that I do in the mental shift video to talk about kind of how you can prevent that from happening, from getting stuck like that. Then there is dream shifting, where either it could be one of two things. Either you're doing some kind of visionary dream work, or you're literally asleep and you're literally dreaming. But either way, in the dream or in the visionary work, when you're in that altered state, whether it's astral projection, whatever, your spirit shifts into the form of an animal, but of course your body is still totally human. That's the way I define it. Some people wrongly define it as physically shifting while you're asleep. That can potentially happen if you're dreaming about shifting, but it's kind of two separate things, because if you physically shift, really that implies physical shifting, you know what I mean? So it's just, if you've ever had a dream where you are an animal, you look down and you see paws, or you're running on all fours and you feel like, oh, this is odd, like my back legs feel a lot shorter and it feels a lot more balanced and I can jump really far, you know that you're not human anymore in that dream, but it's your spirit only, not your body. Phantom shift is really interesting, because phantom shift is technically the intermediate phase right before physical shift happens. Phantom shift, you physically start to feel claws, paws, fangs, ears, tails. You can physically feel it, but if you look, it's just a hand. If you look, it looks the same, but you can physically feel it. And if some people, especially that are tactically gifted in their gifts, if someone were to come up to you and go like that, they could feel it, even though it's just thin air. They could feel the phantom there. Somebody else could feel the phantom there, but they'd have to be probably tactily, clairvoyant to be able to. So then the physical shift is, and again, I'll do all these separately and talk about how to do it and all that in separate videos. The physical shift is the most complex, it's very rare. You have to be mind, body, soul completely balanced, all your chakras balanced and extremely strong. You have to have the right intent. I mean, you have to be born like that. Usually there's not really, I won't rule out there's some kind of spell, but typically you have to be born like that already. And if you're born like with an animal soul, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have the ability to shapeshift. I've witnessed this far too often, where there are animal souls, what we call Therian or animal souls, that they legitimate probably were animals in the past lives and things, but part of their threefold in their current life stems from a past life where they've done something really bad and they've lost the privilege of being an animal ever again, at least until they learn. Sometimes never again, depending on what they did. And so, yes, they have an animal soul, but they don't have the ability to shapeshift. They were not born with that ability to shapeshift. So no matter how hard they try, they can never shapeshift. Then there are people who, much less common, actually are animal souls, but they also have the ability to shapeshift. In order to do that, like I said, you can't be, racking up the points on threefolds. It basically just means a universal kind of punishment, unavoidable, given to you by the universe for something bad, really bad that you did. So assuming that you don't have any of those, you still have to be mind, body, soul so strong enough and balanced enough. Or even if you do have the gift, you won't be able to do it. There'll be like a wall there preventing it from happening because you're not ready. You can try all you want, but if you're not mind, body, soul ready, even if you have the gift for it, even if you have the potential to, you won't actually be able to do it. Chakras are really underrated as to how much it affects your body and just how important they really are. We like to think of chakras as kind of like a lot of times it's like the most simplistic, basic beginner stuff, but really easier said than done. You can know all about chakras, but it's one thing to know all about it and another thing to actually you yourself be completely balanced. Very few people do have complete balanced chakras nowadays, and that's another reason why it's so rare. Nowadays the world is so broken that not a lot of people reach that point of true balance and therefore just aren't strong enough. What happens if you try to shift anyway and push past that barricade and push past that shield when you're not ready? What happens is that you start to feel pain. You start to shift and you start to feel pain. Usually you won't feel any pain at all, maybe some tingling, some uncomfortable feeling, until you get to the chakra that is imbalanced. And when you get to the chakra that's imbalanced, you might all of a sudden feel violently ill or actually pained. There's at least one person I know of that actually went to the hospital, I think, or something. I don't really know the details, but they, hurt themselves. And, it is possible that you can rip, tear something, bleed out and die if you're not balanced, that you're relying on your chakras to be strong enough to withstand something like that. And probably the most complaints that I've heard is that their throat closes up, they can't breathe, or they feel this kind of weird like paralysis thing going on. Sometimes, like I said, they feel immense pain, and other times it's the violently ill, and it's all, you can see where I'm going with this, it's all designated to different chakras, and whatever you feel, you can pinpoint it every time back to the chakra that is associated with that part of your body and why you may be feeling one way versus the other. So yeah, those are the four main types of shifting, and it's a little different the way I say it because it is that ancient paganism. I will be doing separate videos on each, will have its own, so keep in the future, near future, probably look for those.